Have you ever had one of those days where everything just seems a little off? You wake up on the wrong side of the bed, you spill coffee on your favorite shirt, and the universe just seems to be throwing little curveballs your way. Well, that was me last Tuesday. It was a day that started with a series of minor annoyances, but it ended up becoming one of the most memorable days of my life, all because of a simple mistake, a wrong delivery. It all began with a buzz from my apartment intercom. I wasn't expecting anyone. My social calendar was, shall we say, a bit sparse that week, and I'd already done my grocery run. I pressed the button, and a crackly voice announced, "Delivery for apartment 3B. I live in 4B. I almost just said wrong apartment and hung up. I was in the middle of a very important task, which involved untangling a massive knot of old charging cables I'd been avoiding for months. It was a serious battle of wills, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the sigh I heard from the delivery guy over the intercom. It was a sigh that said, "I've been up and down these stairs all day and I just want this to be over." So I buzzed him in. I figured I could just take the package and leave it outside my neighbor's door. No big deal. A few moments later, there was a knock. I opened the door to a delivery driver holding a surprisingly large box. He looked exhausted. I signed for it, gave him a nod, and he was off to his next stop. Now, this is where my simple plan to be a good neighbor went slightly sideways. I looked at the box. It was from a company I'd never heard of, Puzzles of the Past. My neighbor in 3B was an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable. I'd seen her a few times in the hallway. We'd exchanged the usual pleasantries, "Nice weather we're having," or "That elevator is slow today," but that was about it. She seemed quiet, always kind of sad. I couldn't really picture her being into puzzles. Curiosity, as they say, is a powerful thing. I nudged the box with my foot. It was heavy. My brain started buzzing with possibilities. What kind of puzzle was this? Was it one of those massive 5,000-piece landscapes of a Bavarian castle, or maybe a 3D model of the Eiffel Tower? My own little project of untangling cables suddenly seemed incredibly dull in comparison. I decided to take it down to her myself, instead of just leaving it. It felt like the right thing to do. I lugged the box down one flight of stairs and knocked on the door of 3B. I heard a faint "just a moment" from inside. The door creaked open, and there was Mrs. Gable, looking even smaller and more fragile than I remembered. She peered at the large box in my hands with wide, confused eyes. "I think this is for you," I said, with what I hoped was a friendly smile. It was delivered to my apartment by mistake. She looked at the label, her brow furrowed. "Oh dear," she whispered. I didn't order anything." This was not the reaction I was expecting. We both stood there for a second, staring at the mystery box. "Well," I said, "maybe it's a gift." Her expression didn't change. She just looked lost. An awkward silence hung in the air. I felt like I should just leave, but something held me back. It was the same feeling that made me buzz the delivery guy in the sense of connection, I guess. Would you like me to help you open it? I offered. It looks pretty heavy. She hesitated for a moment, then gave a small nod. That would be very kind, she said, her voice barely audible. She stepped back and let me carry the box inside. Her apartment was immaculate, filled with old photographs and antique furniture. It felt like stepping back in time. It was also very, very quiet. I set the box down in her living room and carefully cut the tape. We both leaned in as I lifted the flaps. Inside, nestled in a bed of packing peanuts, was a beautiful, vintage-looking jigsaw puzzle. The picture on the box showed a vibrant, bustling Parisian street scene from what looked like the 1950s. People in classic outfits strolled past cafes. A vintage car drove down the cobblestone street, and the whole scene was bathed in a warm, golden light. It was stunning. Mrs. Gable gasped. Her hand went to her mouth, and for the first time I saw a flicker of genuine emotion in her eyes. "Oh my," she said. "Paris." She reached out and traced the image on the box with a trembling finger. "My husband, Arthur, and we went there for our honeymoon, and just like that, the floodgates opened." She started telling me all about their trip, about the taste of the croissants, the sound of the accordions playing on the street corners, the way Arthur tried to speak French and ended up accidentally ordering 2 entire cheese platters for dinner. As she spoke, it was like color was returning to her world. Her voice grew stronger, her eyes sparkled with old memories, and she even let out a soft laugh. She told me Arthur had passed away 2 years ago, and since then the days had felt long and empty. The silence in the apartment, which I had noticed when I first came in, was something she lived with every day. She then looked at the shipping label again. "It's from my niece, Clara," she said, a smile finally reaching her lips. She must have remembered how much Arthur and I loved puzzles. We used to do one every winter. We decided, right then and there, to start the puzzle. I helped her clear off her coffee table, and we dumped out the 1,000 pieces of cardboard confetti. The task seemed enormous, but for the first time it didn't feel daunting. It felt like an adventure. We started with the edges, as all good puzzlers do, and as we sorted through the chaos of colors and shapes, we talked peen. I told her about my job as a graphic designer, my ridiculous battle with the tangled cables, my dream of one day visiting Japan. She told me about her life as a librarian, her love for gardening, and the mischievous things she and Arthur used to get up to when they were young. Hours flew by. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the living room. We had only managed to complete the border and a small corner of the sky, but it felt like a monumental achievement. My stomach rumbled, and I realized I hadn't eaten since breakfast. "I should probably get going," I said reluctantly. "But could I come back tomorrow to work on this some more?" Mrs. Gable's face lit up. "I would love that," she said, and her smile was the most genuine and beautiful thing I'd seen all day. From that day on, it became our ritual. Almost every evening, I'd go down to her apartment. We'd work on the puzzle, piece by piece, and share stories. The Parisian street scene slowly came to life on her table, and so did our friendship. We learned that we had more in common than we ever could have imagined. We both had a terrible singing voice, but loved old musicals. We both had a weakness for chocolate ice cream. We both believed that a good cup of tea could solve most of life's problems. She became the grandmother I never had, and I think, in a way, I became a little piece of the family she missed. Eventually, we placed the final piece of the puzzle. The Parisian scene was complete. It was beautiful, a mosaic of tiny parts coming together to create something whole. And as we stood there, admiring our work, I realized that's exactly what had happened to us. Two separate, lonely people, brought together by a random mistake, had pieced together a friendship. That wrong delivery was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It taught me that sometimes the most unexpected detours lead to the most wonderful destinations. It reminded me that connection can be found in the most unlikely of places, and that you should never underestimate the power of a simple act of kindness, like helping a neighbor with a heavy box. So next time you get a knock on the door that isn't for you, maybe don't turn it away so quickly. You never know what kind of wonderful puzzle you might be about to start. Thanks so much for listening to my story today. If it resonated with you, maybe hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. See you next time.